Hello, everyone. My name is James Mosier. I am the Director of Legal Education here at ACEDS. I'd like to especially welcome those of you on the call who are new to ACEDS. ACEDS is a membership association that is committed to promoting e-discovery skill and competence through training, education, and networking. We offer the Certified E-Discovery Specialist credential, which is held by more than 1,500 practitioners here in the U.S. as well as around the globe. You can join today and start receiving a number of benefits exclusive to our members, including news content, members-only webcasts, our Bits and Bytes newsletter, a members directory, and special benefits from our affinity partners, which I'll include EDRM and True Staffing. I would like to introduce the presenter of today's webinar. He goes by the name of Salim Dababneh. Salim is a professional services consultant for Ipro, focused on educating clients in e-discovery workflows and best practices. With well over a decade of experience in the e-discovery industry, Salim has managed and directed teams of project managers, developers, litigation support staff on matters ranging from computer forensic collections and e-discovery processing to hosted document and technology-assisted reviews. He has been instrumental throughout his career in developing and teaching best practices in the utilization of legal technologies to clients, colleagues, and industry partners. He's also served as an expert consultant for litigation projects on hundreds of cases, both domestically and abroad. Salim is also a certified e-discovery specialist and holds the ACEDS credential. He also has many other legal software certifications and is a systems trainer along with a systems administrator. Should you have any questions, we are going to ask that you wait until the end of the presentation. You can ask a question by typing into the message box in the bottom right hand of your screen. And now I'm going to hand it over to Salim to start the webinar.
Thanks, James. It's my pleasure today to join the ACEDS crowd again and participate in this session today. As the title suggests, we're going to be talking about ECA workflows today and also how to leverage some of the tools that Ipro's providing in that arena. Appreciate the time and the opportunity to be with everybody here today. So a quick background on Ipro. We'll keep this part brief and just get into the workflow aspects. But Ipro has been around as a software company in the litigation technology arena for 27 years now. And historically, for 27 years, we've built a lot of many different tools. Over the past 3 to 4 years, though, we've really been reshaping our focus to really try and focus on what you see here, our I proclamation. This is really our driving mission statement on trying to improve workflow and automation and really drive down the costs of e-discovery. As we probably have all experienced, the cost of e-discovery can sometimes be a bit overwhelming. And so our goals are to really drive down the costs, to reduce the amount of time you spend per gigabyte, the number of errors that we're encountering per error per gigabyte, and also the amount of human capital that it takes to generally go through an e-discovery project. So with that said, I'm going to do, as we go through this workflow, I'm going to be leveraging Ipro's new automated digital discovery platform. And this is a platform we've developed to really simplify and streamline the e-discovery workflow. A traditional thing for those who've been in the industry for a while is, we're used to batches of data and dealing with things in a batch mentality. And really, we're trying to get away from that batch mentality by going to more of a automated e-discovery solution where you're allowed to, where you can basically just add data to a system and leverage templates and controls behind the scenes to drive the data through the process. Now, as James mentioned, I've been certified in many different e-discovery process applications, and I've been working in this space for well over a decade, actually going on about 14 years now. And one thing I've found that's pretty much consistent across the board with any real e-discovery application out there is that everything, again, is kind of this batch mentality. We start with a process that generally starts with really getting the data moved from hard drives to your network location, or if you're working with an outside provider, moving the data up to their environment. So you have that copy process, which really during that process, nothing else can really be done until that process completes. Moving from there, we move into the ingestion or discovery phase, and that's where we go and collect and gather the metadata and the extracted text from our electronic records. Moving beyond that point, there's usually a handoff to maybe a project management team or some of the case team to go through some filtering activity to try and filter down the size of the data before we then export the data out and then actually go through an import process into a review tool. And at Ipro, we've been guilty of this ourselves up until a few years ago, where we kind of went through the same and just kind of followed the same methodology for managing data. So as we've been looking at ways to try and improve the overall workflow, we realized that we need to get away from that batch mentality and move into more of a streaming approach. So what we do with our ACEDS streaming methodology is really we kind of couple everything together, and now rather than waiting for a full hard drive or some data to copy up to the entire network, what we're doing is we're looking at every individual file on a hard drive. So let's say we've got a terabyte hard drive. We need to copy that up to the network. Rather than waiting for that full copy to complete, we're looking at every individual file or container that's on that hard drive, doing a forensic bit-for-bit comparison, moving that to the network, and then handing it off through a template to the discovery or ingestion phase following that. From there, once we've extracted the text and metadata, we're then moving into filtering. And again, we're going to leverage some controls for some of the areas that really don't change or vary that much. So some of the areas that don't change or vary that much are going to be those things like your date range filters, going through and doing deduplication, things like dnist. These are things that you're going to pretty much do on every project. The date range may change, but the thing that's changing the most is usually those keyword search terms and those variables. So we're going to leave those things for further on down the road. So this approach to the discovery process really allows us to, one, get into the data much quicker, but two, it allows us to really simplify the process by not having to have so many people putting their hands in the pot to get data into review. So with Ipro Solutions, we are a software company, and so our technology can be utilized behind your firewall. You can work with our many service providers around the country and around the world. You can host this through utility clouds like Azure and Amazon Web Services, and we also have a cloud service and infrastructure as a service offering as well. So what we're going to look at today, we're actually going to jump into the software. We're going to go through this process using a streaming methodology with ECA. We're going to start by actually taking some data, and we're actually going to go and upload it. I'm actually based in Dallas, Texas. So I'm going to take some data from my computer today, and we're going to upload it to the network, which is out in Phoenix, Arizona. And we're going to run it through this process where it's actually going to do the remote data transfer. It's going to copy the data. It's going to allow basically to track first contact report, basically your chain of custody. It's going to track the process all the way through. We're going to copy the data up, run through the filtering part, and again, these are the parts that are not going to vary too much as you go from project to project, your dnist, your date range, your file type, and deduplication methodologies. From there, we're going to process the data, load it into review, and there we'll be able to leverage some of the analytic features found in Eclipse to go and perform ECA with analytics involved, and also with some of the different culling features that are found in there. Okay. So with that said, I'm going to jump over to the actual software, and we'll go through that process. So what I'm going to do is I'm sitting here at my computer in Dallas, Texas. I'm going to go ahead and log into my system. Now, based on my user account credentials, I'm going to have access to select number of cases. So if you extend this to your remote offices, or you have maybe a corporate customer of yours, you want them to have the ability to upload their own data into a specific case. They're not going to see all your cases. They're only going to see the cases they have access to. So I'm going to jump into our self-service link where basically, again, this is something that could be behind your firewall. It could be behind a service provider firewall, depending on how you want to manage your data. To us, it really doesn't matter. We want to provide you the software to do that how you need to. So I've got two options to upload the data. I can upload data for processing later. A couple scenarios where I might do that is maybe I've got some data. I don't have a case built yet, maybe in my eDiscovery review tool. And so I just want to upload it to that network. I can use this top option. Second option is I already have a case built. Maybe it's Friday afternoon. I've got some case data. I want to get added to my case, and I don't want to have to wait for a PM to get back to me with a work order. And on the service side, and those who are supporting litigation support, those are the types of calls that, whether it's 50 files or 50 gigs, it's really the same amount of work for them because there's a number of steps they have to go through to get that data loaded. With this self-service process, I basically just go and select the data that I want to copy up. So I'm going to grab some data here for Jim Locker. And we'll just name the collection of data here. So we'll just call this one desktop collection for Gym Locker. We'll go grab the case, and again, based on my user credentials, I'll have access to a select number of cases. In this instance, obviously, I have a few more than a standard user. Now I can go, and once I click my case, I can select which available custodians, or I can add a brand new custodian. So this is new custodian data, so we're going to go ahead and add that. And then where did this data come from? This is desktop collection. And so all the while, the goal here being is to get the data into review. So again, I'm on my self-service dialog page. Basically, I can hit this from my laptop while I'm at a client site, or I can be one of the remote offices that maybe doesn't have a large lit support team on site. I can leverage this control. The goal is to get into review. So here I'm clicking over to different browser to get into my review system. And you see I've got, in this case, I've got 21,363 records. Okay. Right now we don't have any custodians for Gym Locker. We're going to add him there. And the goal behind the scenes is for this system to receive that data. So what I'm showing you now is I'm remote connected into the Phoenix office for Ipro. And here we have our controller system. This is a system basically it's going to actually run the discovery process. This system here is going to use basically a series of templates to go through the discovery, the extraction of data, and then the auto loading right into the review platform. Okay. So again, I'm going to launch this project here. We'll click go. It's going to add me my new custodian. And it submits that job. And from this UI, from here I can watch the data as it's going through the upload process, going into the discovery, filtering, and also all the way down into review. Behind the scenes from the controller system, you'll see it kicks off this new job here for Gym Locker, which we just created. And it's going to start the discovery process. Now, the nice thing about the system is basically it's, again, built off templates. So if we go look at our template real quick, the key driver here on how often you see data in review is our export options. And I've set this for demo purposes down to 3 minutes. Our typical timeline is 30 minutes. That's our default. So essentially, as you're copying up that terabyte of data, every 3 minutes you're going to get a load file into your review system with how much data has been discovered up to that point. I'm starting with a small data set here, obviously, for the demo. But if you've got larger data sets, you can set this parameter to 30 minutes to a couple hours. And so now, rather than waiting for data to show up in review, you can get the review team busy. A couple things to keep in mind as you go through this workflow is, anytime we're dealing with electronic data, there's bound to be some sort of errors. And technical errors are bound to happen. I'm sure we've all run into them. So what we do is, as the data is flowing through this process, and as we're going through into review, we take any files that have any sort of issue that as they're being either copied up or going through the filter and processing phases, we'll take that file and also its parent-child relationships, we'll pull those aside on a separate track. Now, most traditional systems, if you have errors during your discovery phase, you have to address those before you can move on to loading the data into review. With this approach, we're going to segregate out all the files that have errors, have issues, allowing your lit support team or your project managers or your tech analysts to deal with those errors, but get all the good stuff into review. We want to make sure we're getting into review as quickly as possible so you can start dealing with the aspects of your case that matter most. Okay. So that separate track, we'll set those things aside again versus blocking everything up. You see the system will auto-launch from enterprise copying, so it's copying the data up, runs into what we call our streaming discovery job, and then it automatically kicks off this data extract export. And this is after 3 minutes, it's going to start loading data up into the review system. So again, the part of it here is all based off of your templates. This is basically let your smart people look at the discovery options, let them go ahead and set the templates and the groundwork, convert that into the controls and options here, such as maybe date range filters, file type extensions. If you're going to apply deduplication, apply that here, and then removing your mismatches. Setting up an export job, basically taking whatever metadata information you need into review, pulling that over, and then again set up based on a timed interval. Okay. So with that said, as we're running the data over, you'll see we've got the data extract export now in progress, pushing data over. So if I go back to my review system, again, we're at 21,363. I'll do a quick refresh, see if we have any data just yet. And if you have questions as we go, you can kind of post those. We'll try to answer them as we're going through this, but then we're going to get into some of the analytics pieces of what to do once your data is in review. Should be almost there. And so again, the process is very simple. From this side, the review side, loading the data is very easy. Many different offices, like I said, can have access to this based on user controls. You can limit which cases they have access to. And again, the idea is to auto push right into your review system from there. All right, so there we go. So now we're at 22,195 records. If I go and refresh my custodian tree, rebuild that, we'll now have a record in here, or a custodian reference for Mr. James Locker. And so we'll come through here, go to the end of the actual case here, refresh that. And so here we have Jim Locker is now available in our custodian list. We've got his data in review. We can start doing our data review and moving on from there, okay? Now, as far as the analytics pieces and using those for ECA, the pieces we've done so far are basically the main filtering, things like DNIST, the date range, file type, and deduplication. Now we're going to move into filtering with some of the analytics features, noting that as we push the data into review, we've already applied auto keyword search terms, and that's something you can set up in advance to basically get your keyword hit reports. But the next thing we want to move into is looking at the different analytics options and how we can leverage those to improve our review, to improve our efficiency, and to really filter the data down to those things that matter most. So inside of Eclipse, our review tool, at no additional cost to any of our customers, there's no per gigabyte fee or anything like that, you have the options to leverage email threading, the near duplicates, concept searching, clustering categories, and technology-assisted review. And so we're going to kind of walk through each one of these. The near duplicates basically is going to group similar documents based on a percentage of similarity on the body of the document itself. And so with that, I'm going to pop over to review here, and we'll pull open our relationship panel, and we'll pull open my near duplicates view. And so now as we look at the records we have, I'm going to go to my all documents view. I'm just going to kind of take a few records here. As we navigate through the records, the system will tell us if we have documents that are similar in nature to what it is we're looking at. And so you'll see here there's a similarity score, and you can relabel these fields into something a little more user-friendly for you. But the similarity score, 89% to this other document here. So record 6, 89% similar. But you notice the tag group, this one's been marked privileged, this one is not. So it may be worth looking at those similarities. And we've got some reports and so forth you can leverage. But the benefit of near deduplication is to allow you to identify files that are similar, to pull those together into review. So I could target like this group here. We've got some that are in the high 90s as far as similarity. If I want to look at all those records at the same time, I can double-click any one down in the bottom section. It creates a subset search for me to now go through each record, and then I can open up my tag panel and start tagging the documents based on whether or not they're privileged, responsive, and so forth. Once I'm done looking through all these near duplicates, I can then return to the main document set, basically go back to where I left off in my search before I jumped into this section. So we'll jump in here and go back to where we were. Now coming back to record 6, another option you have that's available to you is to go ahead and look at those differences and the comparisons. So when I pop open this magnifying glass against the record, it'll let me know what's the same, what's different, and so forth. And it uses this comparison against the record highlighted above. So if I do my comparison against the other record, what are the differences? Well, we've added some more text. And one thing you would probably want to look for is in the main body of the forwarded message, has anything changed? Has somebody altered something that came before? And in this one, we don't see any of that. If I saw some items removed or maybe some green entries where somebody's manipulating something they're forwarding on to somebody else, that would jump right out at me just by using this type of view here. Okay? And so that's some of the benefits of using the near duplicate view. Now, going back to the different options we also have then are email threading. So with email threading, Basically going to group all parts of email strings together. Now, one thing it does really well is it manages all the different batches for you and all the different kind of branches of the data. So you'll notice maybe I've got an original email that was sent. If one user, then forwarded on to others, you'll see that. If another user grabs and forwards it on with an attachment, you'll see the different branches. And basically what we want to get to is all these red items, basically the final tips of each branch, and review those. It'll save us having to review everything. We're still going to have to review more than just one file. It's not going to basically just give us one instance. You're going to want to actually look at each cap or each tip of every branch. And so that's built in as well in an email thread view. And so as you see down below here, I've got a list of records that all relate to this email thread. Now it's pulling both attachments and emails as a group. Again, with something like this, I probably want to dive into it as I'm conducting my review, to look at everything at the same time. And so I jump in here, and now I can look at all 23 records, both emails and attachments, go through and conduct my review, tag things and whatnot, and then jump back to my review set. Okay. Now, beyond just some of the basic analytic features like email threading and near deduplication, we want to get into things like concept clustering. And so concept clustering is really a neat way to kind of visualize and kind of take the mystery out of your data. So when we bring the data into Eclipse, by leveraging a more visual representation of our data, we can kind of take the mystery out of what it is we're dealing with. And so this view here allows us to dive in and really look at what's being discussed, what are kind of the main talking points. Now, you'll notice on the left-hand side, on the left-hand side here, we get a tree view into all the different types of categories or concepts that are being discussed. So we've got things dealing with patent and copyright and trademark and so forth. When I click on that, it navigates right into that area where all those documents are. And when I hover over this, gives me a tooltip, tells me there's 1,900 documents out of my 22,000 that are talking about things related to patents and copyright and trademark. And so depending on which avenue I want to go, as I work my way further out in the wheel, it'll actually move further on through the system and kind of break the categories down a little bit more. So maybe I want to get into inventions and copyright that way, or maybe software copyrights and so forth. Now these clusters, we can build these based off of the entire case. I can actually target, maybe I want to break it down into file extensions, and I want to just look at certain files that are, just email or maybe just the PowerPoints. And I want to break those down into a special cluster. And so I can also do that with specific custodians. And so when I grab a target custodian or a target date range, I can visualize the data that's within that date range or for that custodian and what's most prevalent. And so this is a great way for the legal team to kind of wrap their head around what, the talking points, the discussions that go on with the corporate clients that we're representing. And so this will give you that sneak peek view into the things that they talk about that maybe you wouldn't think to search on otherwise. And so, you might find things in here that are dealing with items that are completely irrelevant as well. And so you can take those irrelevant items and set those aside and, mark those for low priority review. Maybe I've got a high priority review and things of that nature. Now, as we're loading data into the system, a question come up from the audience here: is it possible to exclude some kind of file extensions before processing? As we go through the actual process here, there is the filtering that you can do by file types. So you can list that out either by extension or by the header. And it's important to know the difference. With the header, if a file is created in Microsoft Word, and it's saved, and then somebody changes the extension to .jpeg. If any casual user comes along and tries to launch that document, it's going to throw an error and tell you that the file is corrupt because the extension, the .jpeg, doesn't match the actual header, this is by design supposed to be a Word document. And so our system will allow you to filter either based on the file type extension or based on the header. And so our system is always going to look at the actual header values of the file to make sure that when we extract metadata from the file, we use the appropriate program to pull that metadata out, the text out of the file. So great question. And again, as we go through, feel free to add other questions as we go. So this view here, this is an open source view. I've seen it in some other applications as well, but this is an open source design that was created at a university campus here in the United States. And so we built this using HTML5 as the viewer behind the scenes. I've seen other people deploy it with Java and some other methods. But it allows you, again, that quick view into, okay, what are the things that this group or this company talks about? What things do we need to focus on? Are they dealing with environmental law? Are they dealing, they're dealing with the stock market? What things are of interest in this group? Now, anytime I click on a particular section, it actually runs a search for me, so it filters down to that group of documents. So behind the scenes, I can click on the search results, and now I can go and actually read the particular files that are coming back in the search results. And so right now it's kind of hard in a presentation like this to show you this, but we do have the ability to support dual monitor. So if I've got two monitors at my desk, what I would do is take this main view and I would undock the document view and put that on a separate monitor altogether, allowing me some freedom to run searches and kind of navigate through the metadata information while I look at the documents that are being loaded up for me, okay? In here, I'm going to go ahead and close this back down. Maybe I come across a document that's really, something that really stands out, something that's very important to our case. Maybe I want to take the content of that document. I want to highlight a key paragraph, and I want to go search the entire case for anything that may relate or be similar to this particular paragraph or this block of text throughout my case. So when I highlight this block of text, I have a couple options. I can right-click, and I can go and add text to what they call a category. An analytic category is something that you can basically pre-design in your case. And this is where, the clustering is the computer kind of grouping things together based on concepts. With categories, you can kind of define some categories of your own. Maybe you're trying to find things that deal with contracts or trade secrets and things of that nature. And so by targeting a particular document, I can send the text of a document to a category, and then when I pick the category to send it to, it basically going to allow me then to go and search the rest of the case for similar content. So even though I feed in maybe 5 or 6 documents to trade secret, when I ran that, it brings back 9,800 records that have similar items based on the text we fed it. And so, you may have, much smaller amounts of data, again, depending on the text you feed it. One neat thing I see some people do, which is very clever, is you go ahead and take and create the ideal document that you'd like. If I want to find this sort of content in my case, you can actually take that document, load it into the system, and then use that as a way to drive your categories. And so leveraging that will allow you then basically to search across your entire case for any similar concepts that are being discussed. And the benefit of using concepts versus keywords is that now, if I'm searching for the word, Thanksgiving, for example. Thanksgiving is going to have a bunch of related terms that, if you just search the keyword, well, you're only going to get direct hit, but maybe you miss out on things like holiday season or turkey bowl or, holiday shopping or, these things that might relate in concept to Thanksgiving that you wouldn't hit with that keyword search, okay? So those are two other areas, the clustering and the categories that tie in. Now, we also have a visualization piece in our system for ECA. And so with that, I can kind of get into my searching through the system and use the analytics tied with some visualizations. So using the visualizations or ECA piece in Eclipse allows me to maybe take a group of documents, kind of get a report based on a saved search, and maybe I want to target all the different documents that were sent to any sort of law firm. So I take all the data and I go and search all the different email addresses. We're going to grab everything that was sent to some sort of law firm that may not be our own. And we're going to target any of these items. And now maybe I want to focus in on select file types. And you'll see it basically updates on the fly the search results based on the items that we're targeting. So maybe I'm also going to pull in my different file types of interest that I want to focus on. Grab those items here. Okay. And now I've got, all my custodians, and again, it gives me the breakdown of the number of documents coming back, the documents with families, so with attachments, the unique docs, and so forth. Now, maybe I want to limit this to just a select group of custodians. So I can target maybe a select group. I'm going to maybe select all for now, and I'm going to do kind of an inverse. I'm going to, rather than target any of these, I'll target none of these. So I'm going to deselect a few of these here. Let's grab, let's see, these two as well. Apply that. And so now I end up with a visual representation of the amount of documents by custodian. And we're filtering, communication between them and the different law firms that have represented the group. And so you can use these different criteria to help build your search. So rather than running just kind of traditional keyword search or using concept search or the clustering, you can do some visual culling using some of the different controls in the ECA piece as well. And so really the goal is to try and provide you with multiple different ways to create searches, to save searches, to kind of dissect the data. And really the goal is to take the mystery out of the data. We do have a timeline view at the top, so if maybe your collection date range was 2002 to 2006, right away, if you have a case, if you've ever experienced this, where you've done a collection and you don't realize till months down the road that you're missing data for an entire year or entire quarter. The timeline view allows you to quickly see as soon as you load data that, we've got pretty much no data inside of 2005 to 2006. So this is going to immediately on day one lead to questions to my collection team, to my team who's gone and actually loaded data, make sure we've got everything in the system that we should. So using some of the visual tools coupled with your concept searching, so if I look at, doing the combination of concept searching or text searching, metadata searching, and so forth. So all these tools are built into the system, and it's really not meant to be a solution for every case. Every case is different. Maybe for some cases you just need to use email threading and near dupes. Maybe in another case you really just need to use the clustering to really try and figure out what it is you're dealing with as far as the document data collection. And so the way that the concept engine, so a good question comes up is like, how does a concept tool know that shopping is related to Thanksgiving? And so concepts that are created, it uses a linguistic engine behind the scenes that basically takes and combines things together. So an example, a driver's license. Well, things that relate to a driver's license would be automobiles, would be, travel, and there's concepts that relate at different levels. Like at one level deep with driver's license, you're going to have things like the DMV and licensing agencies and so forth. And then, at the next level deep, you're going to have things dealing with automobiles and traffic and so forth. And these are based on these linguistic engines that tie things together based on how they're discussed, or the terminology that's used, how it relates based on the words that wrap around it. Okay, so it's not just looking at the item itself. It's looking at in what context was that used. And so that's kind of how the concept engine is working to identify relationships based on the patterns of the terms used in conjunction with each other. Okay. All right, and so again, you've got a number of different features there that are built in. The idea with the ECA workflow is to really get in to identify the data you have, to do that, the file type, the deduplication, DNIST, date range filters, but then getting in and using the different tools to identify how your data correlates with the case at hand, how it matters to your particular cases. And so with that said, it kind of brings us to the conclusion of how you can leverage ECA components in review to really simplify and streamline the review process. We'll kind of now open up the question to Q&A, and we'll kind of just poke around. For those who have no questions, you're welcome to sit around and listen in. And for those who would like to ask questions, again, please use the Q&A board, and we'll go ahead and process that behind the scenes for you.
Thanks, Salim.
Thank you, James. So a couple of questions coming in. The first question here is, do you have dedicated master and worker machines for processing? So that kind of goes into the questions about how to deal with the data and how to load things up. The way our system works as we're going through the processing phases here, we're basically we have a number of machines. It's a scalable solution. It's a software solution. And so you may have only one, what we call a worker. A worker is basically a virtual machine or a PC basically sitting behind the scenes waiting to do work. And so if I connect to my environment here, go and grab that. So basically behind the machine, I think in this environment we only have 4 worker machines. You can set up machines to be like a primary driver, and you can have other machines that are going to basically drive the process across particular cases. So I can set one machine to be the priority machine for a particular client or environment, and then I can also set other machines to basically just be assigned to certain types of tasks. So you see I have a few OCR dedicated machines. I have a couple of machines that are set to my primary task list. Really all this is basically just scaling and increasing your throughput without having to have a number of different people connect. So you can just add more machines behind the scenes and allow it to push the data through for you as you go through. Any other questions on the ECA components or the self-service piece? Pull that back up there. Any questions on that or the ECA? Okay. Yeah, good question. So one of the questions asking, I assume the tool has different levels of views, so regular reviewers don't see ECA. Correct. So all of these different panels you see on the left-hand side are driven by user permissions. The permissions are driven obviously by the admin team. And so we want to limit who's getting into and leveraging the ECA pieces and the various controls, whether somebody can TIFF on the fly or whether somebody can do redactions and things of that nature. So you have all these different options where you can kind of limit and scale down users' permissions based on what you need them to be doing.
So we had a question come in that came in from Linda Thomas. So does this version incorporate ECA components of Allegro?
Yeah, so as we said earlier in the call, Ipro has been in the business for 27 years creating software, and we had a tool called Allegro. We still do, and really what we've done is we're trying to blend the workflow where you're not having to jump between multiple different programs. And so we used to have a front-end ECA tool where you would go and perform your ECA pieces, but then you would take that data out, then go into review, and then do your review. What we want to do is blend those two things together, and so you'll see inside of Eclipse, which is our review tool, the ECA components, the visual components are there. Allegro also had basically an engine, a discovery engine that was very fast, very scalable, and we've actually loaded that into eCapture, which is the processing tool for Ipro. And so we've kind of taken that one program and layered it over the 2 others to take it from 3 down to 2, and with the end goal being that we'll essentially just have this one platform that basically runs the data through, and then from there you do the review. The Eclipse tool is quote-unquote a review tool, but it's really more of a data repository because it does have the ability to push to other review applications if you want to use it just for ECA components in Eclipse alone. All right, so some of the questions came up. We saw that you can analyze based on custodian and file types and so forth, asking if you can analyze based on first set of docs tagged responsive. So absolutely, you can take any variation. You can grab a collection of documents based on a search, based on file types, and so forth, is that you can then create your clusters off of that, or if I want to create and do some ECA filtering, I can pick other fields. I showed doing it off of domains and off of custodians and file types, but I can pick any metadata field in the system and do some culling based on that.
And we have another question in.
Yeah.
One of the challenges in Canada is the requirement to have the data hosted in Canada. Do you have any servers located in Canada?
Yeah, so full disclosure, I was actually raised in Canada, London, Ontario, so glad to have another Canadian on the phone. With that said, yeah, we do have service partners that have data centers throughout Canada. And so, again, with our tools, and what we're providing, if you're talking about Ipro specifically, we're offering solutions that you can put in your own firewall, so you can bring it in-house to your firm. You can work with a service provider in Canada. We have a number of them who use that in Canada. You can host it through infrastructure as a service and so forth. But our colo for Ipro specifically is in Phoenix, Arizona with the IO data centers. But we do have partners. So if that's something that you're looking for help with, we definitely have a number of service providers who are up there in Canada doing a great job with this.
Thanks. We have an additional question. Is the ECA Analytics Visual Search currently available?
The visual search aspects are slowly being implemented into Eclipse. Some are, not all of them are there. You know, the end game is to try and have email threading in a visual manner, some of the communication patterns. Those things are not in there yet, but the ECA Analytics Visual Search capability is in our latest release of Eclipse. So kind of, you know, recap the workflow and some of the things that I want to point out too is with the streaming process, it's really designed to help with ECA, but you know, some people feel like, you know, maybe they've already got the data on the network. Well, maybe you don't need to use the self-service or the copy part. You can start your process, you know, with basically the discovery. So you don't have to start with moving data across the network. If it's already on a network drive, you can start from there. And then with the ECA pieces, if you're already in a review tool, you know, like Eclipse, you can basically leverage the ECA components right there in your review tool itself. And so there's, you know, flexibility in the actual process. The goal is to try and streamline it, to cut down the number of people touching it, and to really maximize your ability to get into review as quickly as possible. So a question asking, is this a relativity product? It is not a relativity product, but we actually tie into relativity. So for those of you who have cases with relativity, we can do this streaming process where you can auto-load and push directly into relativity, or you can push into Ipro's review tool, Eclipse. Eclipse is a competitive tool to relativity. That said, we do have integration directly to relativity, which provides the push into, but also, you know, mass TIFFing operations, OCR, productions. I can actually hook from relativity to those eCapture or the Ipro system behind the scenes to load data and to manage imaging jobs and productions and everything else. So it does hook in, but it's not a relativity product itself. Any other questions, comments, any jokes? James, anything else you can think of that may be worthwhile for some of our newer ACEDS members? Any questions you thought of?
No, I think that just about does it. I want to thank everybody for participating in the webinar today. This will be on the ACEDS site for review within the next 24 to 48 hours. And Salim has been kind enough to make the slide deck available for those that would like to review the presentation. So with that, we're going to wrap up the webinar for today, and you can see the number as well as the email address if anybody has any further questions, and they'll make sure that you guys get taken care of.
Thanks, James.
Thank you, Salim.
Thanks, Annabelle.